we discover awareness or consciousness, we're discovering that who and what we are is not bound by this body-mind, that our true nature is unconstrained, it's unbounded, it's infinitely vast. In fact, it contains everything. So we go from experiencing ourselves to be this time-bound, skin-encapsulated, limited creature who's living out a temporary story with a beginning and an end, to discovering that we are this vast, infinite, timeless beingness, awareness.
Welcome to Meditation Changes Everything with spiritual teacher Craig Hamilton, a podcast exploring the deeper potentials of meditation practice and how it can change every aspect of human life. In this episode, Craig turns our attention to something we almost always overlook. Every moment of life is filled with experiences, thoughts, sensations, emotions. But rarely do we notice the conscious awareness in which all of these experiences are arising. What happens when that awareness begins to recognize itself? This is the shift at the heart of awakening. Through guided meditation and reflection, Craig invites us into this recognition of awakened awareness and to the deeper mystery it holds. We hope you enjoy the show. Here's Craig.
There are many different ways to understand and speak about what spiritual transformation or enlightenment is all about and how it works. It's a very simple shift, but it also has enormous complexity, many layers and dimensions to it. So it's spoken about in different ways, and one of the most common kind of metaphors we hear for this spiritual transformation is the metaphor of awakening, of waking up. It's certainly the chosen metaphor I've latched onto to describe this work that we're doing, and of course we hear about it all over the place. It's very common. The idea that enlightenment or transformation is a form of awakening. And I think this image of awakening is such a potent one because it captures the dramatic nature of the shift. In its essence, spiritual illumination is as dramatic as waking up from sleep. Now, again, often, we wake up from sleep slowly, so it's not a dramatic thing. It's not like, oh my God, we don't every morning go, oh my God, I'm awake. But when you think about it, one moment you're asleep, you're unconscious. Maybe even you're in a dream world. Those are the ones that are more dramatic, right? Maybe you're in a dream world and you're very fully engaged and this whole world's happening and there's all this emotion and intensity and then suddenly some noise in the house wakes you up and you're wide awake in a completely different world. And that world you were in ceases to exist. And there's this world and you're familiar with it because of course it's the world you spend your life in. But that dramatic shift from asleep to awake captures this, the kind of extraordinary, remarkable, and complete nature of the shift that spiritual illumination brings about. It also, of course, points to the idea that, you were asleep, meaning you weren't in the real world, you weren't conscious, you weren't awake, you weren't in the world. Maybe you were in a dream world, which your mind was just, churning out. And it seemed real, maybe that dream world, but now suddenly you're in the real world. And spiritual awakening has that same quality from, oh, I thought I was in reality, but now I see reality. I've woken up to what's really so. I'm seeing things the way they really are. This metaphor of spiritual awakening can refer to different things. But one way of understanding it is that consciousness awakens to itself. Awareness discovers awareness. Consciousness discovers consciousness, which means you discover yourself. You awaken to who you really are, beyond appearances, beyond your body, beyond your mind, beyond every concept, idea, feeling, sensation you could have about yourself. You discover that you are not that body, those thoughts, those feelings, those stories, those experiences. You are the one that is having those experiences, the one who is aware of all of those things, but is not itself a thing. You discover that you are the awareness, the consciousness that's knowing all of those things, but is not identified with any of them. And you discover that this awareness and consciousness that you are is infinite. There's not a place that you are. You can't be found or located anywhere. You seem to be everywhere at once. So this is what I'm describing here is what I mean. One of the things I mean, or one of the ways I could speak about what I mean by awakened consciousness. You hear me, those of you who've been around me for a while, hear me speak a lot about awakened consciousness as really what it's all about. The discovery of awakened consciousness. One way of simply understanding what awakened consciousness is, it's consciousness that is awake to itself, awareness that knows itself, that knows its own nature. Now I'm using these words, consciousness and awareness, and I want to just take a moment to talk about what I mean by them, because often let's put this, we're so used to thinking of things as things, meaning of relating to any term, we look for something that we can think of that term represents. We relate to everything as an object. Anything we can think about becomes some object in our mind, because otherwise we can't think about it. We can't engage with it. It seems. So when we hear about consciousness or awareness, often we kind of imagine that, if we can conceive of it at all, often we go, what the heck is consciousness? What's awareness? What do you mean? But we often in spiritual circles, we kind of imagine it as this kind of ineffable substance, this a field of subtle energy that pervades everything. Consciousness, awareness. Especially consciousness has that connotation a little bit. Consciousness is all there is. Consciousness is everywhere. We hear these things and we imagine it's kind of this kind of sparkly, subtle field that we can tune into, let's say, or become aware of. But I don't really, we can have experiences of a sparkly, subtle field. You can have experiences of subtle energy. There are all kinds of spiritual experiences that include these experience of tapping into a kind of vast, kind of vibrant substance or energy. But that's not consciousness or awareness. And I don't mean anything like that. When I'm using the term consciousness or awareness, or when any mystic, any teacher of enlightenment is speaking about consciousness and awareness, what we're pointing to is actually very similar to the way scientists speak about consciousness or awareness. what we're pointing to is subjectivity itself, meaning interiority, meaning, and I know I'm using terms again, some of you are glazing over going, what are these technical terms? What are you talking about? So, but just, I mean, it's so simple. We make it complicated. Consciousness or awareness is really just pointing to the experiencer, the capacity to have experiences. Like you look at take it for a moment, just imagine a person walking down the street, walking down a crowded street, let's say. You can look at that person from the outside, and what do you see? There's just a body walking. They have eyes. They're looking, engaging with other people. Maybe they're saying things. Words are coming out of their mouth. All this is happening. That's the physical event that's occurring. But then we also would agree, okay, there's the object, that person doing all those things, but there's also something else happening. There's an experience of being the person. There's that person's inner world, the experience of every encounter with every person on the street, of, the thoughts in their mind and the decisions of, when to cross the street or not. There's a whole inner world. And then there's just the pure capacity to have an inner world. There's the pure experience, just the experience of being alive. The subject. But all of this is just, if it ever seems complicated, just think simply, the subject is the one having the experience. It's the ability to have an experience. It's the experiencer itself. Consciousness, awareness. Now, here's the thing. So consciousness is always here. Awareness is always here. It's not far away. It's not some, subtle mystical field that we need to discover. Ooh, I discovered pure consciousness. Sounds very lofty. Pure consciousness is always here. We're always having experiences. You are, except maybe when you're asleep and there's nothing, you're in a deep sleep and there's nothing going on. But at any time you're awake and alive, experience is a constant experience. You have feelings, thoughts, encounters. It's all happening. And it's always happening because you're conscious, you're aware. So consciousness or awareness is always here. But here's the thing. In ordinary, conventional human life, consciousness is almost never even recognized once. There might be momentary glimpses of it, but we won't even realize what we're glimpsing. But most of the time in a human life, we never become aware of the subject. We never become aware of consciousness. Which means, see if you really get this, it means we never once experience ourself. See, in our ordinary, unenlightened, conventional human life, we're always only aware of objects in consciousness, things. So what do I mean by that? So you're aware of other people, which you experience. We largely experience as just, these events, these objects outside ourselves. We experience the world around us, certainly, all the really concrete, tangible things, cars and buildings and furniture and bicycles and sunsets and trees and beauty and nature and the ocean, the world. It's all these things that we encounter. And then there's all the internal things, the thoughts that arise in your mind, fantasies, images, the future, memories of past events, feelings of all kinds, including deep, profound, subtle spiritual feelings. that move us to tears, make us feel, tremendous love, gratitude, reverence. There's still feelings, things, objects arising in consciousness. And even the self that most of us take ourselves to be, the self that comes to mind when I say, think about yourself, or bring yourself to mind, if I say become aware of yourself right now. Largely what that's made of is an image of the self. You know what your body looks like, and you have a picture of what your body looks like. Often it's either idealized in a positive way. We sort of think of ourselves as like how we look at our perfect best, or it's a negative idealization. We think of ourselves as like our worst, depending, because the ego kind of plays both sides. It's always got a negative story of the self and a positive story, and it kind of alternates. Rarely is it objective or clear, but that's a different point. Sorry, I don't want to bring in too many things. But anyway, we have a picture of our body, and we kind of have a set of feelings, the kind of feeling of being me. And we have thoughts about ourselves, the story of ourselves with all of our accomplishments and life experiences and values and what's important to us, a little narrative about the self. And all of that kind of clusters together as like, that's the self, that's me. Who am I? When people often say, you don't really know who you are, or people say, I really, went through a lot of difficult experiences in life, and now I really know who I am. People will say. And what they mean is, they got clearer about what their values are, about what was important to them. They were maybe tested and challenged by a difficult life event, and they kind of said, I had to make tough decisions, and I did, and I took a stand for my priorities, or for my truth, for my, my values, and we feel more like, I know myself now. I know who I am relative to everyone else, and I know where I'm at. But all of that, even, which is all good, it's good when we have a values clarifying event in life, something that really builds our character and strengthens our sense that we can take a stand and be consistent even when life tests us. Like, that's all very good self-development. But even all of that, if you look at what it is, it's all things that we know about ourselves. Still all objects in consciousness. And that's about as far as the self-discovery journey typically goes, to where that very clarifying, this is me, I know who I am. And, like, for a human life, that's a very good version of, most human lives don't even get to there. So, or maybe they get there very late in life. Sometimes people kind of closer to the end of life start to have all that crystallization of, wow, this is what it's really all about. This is who I really am now. But still, we're just knowing things about the self, things our mind can know, things we can feel and sense, and they're all things. So you look at the great wisdom traditions, the great enlightenment traditions, and they very often are asking this big question, but who is the self with a capital S? That's not your true self. Awakening is the discovery of the self, the true self. Now, the true self that spiritual awakening points to is not, and by the way, we can just leave certain Buddhist schools out of this for the moment. I can, scoop all the no self talk in, because it doesn't, no self very much relates to everything I'm talking about here, the whole Buddhist doctrine of no self, but I don't want to confuse, I want to add one more layer. So we just set aside, I'm very aware of that, and I know some traditions are very excited about the idea that there's no self, but they just mean none of those things that I'm talking about are who you are. That's in a sense, and more than that. But back to the point about the self. So we have a lot of mystics saying you don't really know yourself. You know all these things about yourself, but there's a deeper, bigger self. What that's always pointing to is the discovery that we aren't all the things we can know. We are the one who knows all those things. We are the one who experiences all those things, but is not itself a thing. So, understood in one way, spiritual awakening is awakening to the experiencer that's having all those experiences, the subject of all of those objects, the subject that knows all those objects. And that consciousness, that awareness, is always right here. It's the awareness that's having every experience you're having. It's the awareness or consciousness that's hearing the words I'm saying right now. In other words, we're not talking about some mystical substance that's far away, it requires a great journey to discover. We're saying, no, just become aware of who's hearing these words in this exact moment. Even though the discovery of consciousness and awareness, the subject, the self, it's a very simple shift in this moment to become aware of something that's always here in this moment anyway, that you just didn't notice before. Even though it's that simple and available, it is a tremendously significant discovery for a human being. It can be an overwhelming recognition, arresting, stops us in our tracks. Because when we discover awareness or consciousness, we're discovering something that is not local. It's not located somewhere. We're discovering that who and what we are is not bound by this body-mind, that our true nature is unconstrained. It's unbounded. It's infinitely vast. In fact, it contains everything that could ever arise, could all only ever arise in consciousness, which is who and what we are. So we go from experiencing ourselves to be this time-bound, skin-encapsulated, limited creature who's living out a temporary story with a beginning and an end, to discovering that we are this vast, infinite, timeless beingness, awareness. So how do we become aware of awareness? How does consciousness come to know itself? It can happen in a lot of different ways. If you're deliberately and religiously in your meditation refusing to identify with thoughts, refusing to become lost in the mind, you're gradually kind of carving out a space where, well, what else could you be aware of? Because awareness is going to go somewhere. Yeah, you gradually become aware of itself, because that's all that's left, in a sense. So that's one way of practicing that can open the mystery of awareness to itself, to us right now. Because, see, the good news is, so even though we have a lifetime and many lifetimes, meaning, eons of human history of being completely attentive to objects, to things, and not paying attention to the subject, because it's so close at hand, it is something that can be pointed out to us and that we can turn our attention toward and discover directly. In other words, it's not far away, it's right here. We can just do it. You can do it. And in fact, I want to just see if in a more, non-meditative way, we can all just begin to notice what I'm pointing to. So, just in your experience right now, outside of meditation, just sitting here listening to me, just look around you and take in what you can see. Most of you are probably sitting indoors in a room in your home. Some of you might be at your office. Some of you might be outside. Wherever you are, just look around for a moment. Just choose something that you can see, something in your visual field, a piece of furniture, a tree, whatever. And look at it with some intensity, meaning really notice the detail of it. Don't look at it vaguely. Look at it, like really study it for a minute. Notice the contours and the shape and the color and maybe the variations in the color and texture. Become extremely present to this object in consciousness. Just keep studying it, observing more and more about it, letting yourself be really attentive to this object. And now I want to invite you to shift your attention to that which is aware of the object, to the awareness of the object. Now, I don't mean think about who or what is aware of the object. I don't mean try to bring to mind other objects that are about the awareness of the object. I mean, directly bring your attention to awareness of the object. So you're letting the object remain an object in consciousness. So you're not pushing it away. You're not trying to make it go away. There's still an object that you're aware of. But you're bringing your awareness and attention to the awareness of it. And don't worry if you're doing it right. Don't try to figure out how to do it. Don't try to figure out if you're doing it right. None of that. Just follow the simple instruction and just try it. That's all we can do with any of these practices. You just try it. Simple. No inner critic allowed. And try it again. Try it in a different way. Now just bring your attention fully back to the object. Or, let's bring it to a different object. Just shift to something else. Different part of the room or just different place, different thing. And again, observe it closely, study it, noticing the color, the texture, the variations, the shape, the way the light is playing on the shadows, what it's made of. Just really studying it closely, giving your full attention and presence to this object, this visual object. If any of you are visually impaired and you can't do exactly what I'm saying, maybe choose a bodily sensation that you can feel. Choose some part of your body and study that, or an imagined object. You can do this with any sensation. In other words. So you're studying it closely, becoming very intimate with this object. And now shift your attention to the awareness of the object, the awareness that's knowing, perceiving, and experiencing all of this object. And don't try to find it somewhere. Just let yourself become aware of awareness of the object. You're letting your attention rest on the subject of your experience. You're still having the experience. There's still an object in consciousness. But you're giving your primary attention to the subject, the perceiver, the experiencer. Okay. So what was that like? Don't try to figure out if you did it right. Don't worry if nothing happened or it just seemed confusing. See, here, the interesting thing with all of the direct awakening practices is, on the one hand, I'm doing everything I can to make awakening as simple and accessible and down to earth as I possibly can in everything I'm doing here. And so, hopefully you're getting the feeling from me that this is not hard and that this is doable and that you can do it, no matter what your results of your past spiritual practices have been. hopefully you're feeling the confidence of like, oh, okay, well, Craig's saying this is simple, so I should be able to do it. And you're getting, we're relaxing, because often spirituality has been made so mystical and lofty and, unreachable that a lot of us are kind of like, well, whatever. I don't know if I'll ever have any of that, but I do want to meditate and feel more peaceful and centered and less reactive. But, enlightenment, who knows what that even is? So, you feel from me, I'm saying, hey, no, enlightenment, awakening is actually real, and it's available. Well, why would it exist if it wasn't available to us? Like, why would this extraordinary human potential and possibility, life-altering, world-changing, super consciousness exist if it wasn't something we could access? Wouldn't make any sense. So you need to feel that, hold that, allow that possibility consciousness to really open up inside you in the context of humanity's historical quest for enlightenment, and what a big deal it's been and it has held to be. So let's see if we can hold these two truths side by side in our practice.
If the approach to meditation we've been exploring today inspires you, you are invited to tune into a 90-minute online workshop Craig will be hosting called Meditation 2.0, The Miracle of Direct Awakening. In the workshop, he'll share a powerful new approach to meditation practice and guide you in a series of brief meditation experiments so you can experience it for yourself. You can listen to that at freemeditationworkshop.com. That's freemeditationworkshop.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we hope you'll share our show with others. And please subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you have a minute to write a short review on your podcast app, we would deeply appreciate your support. You can stay connected to the show by subscribing to our newsletter at meditationchangeseverything.com. Each week, we'll send you new audios and videos from Craig, and we'll also let you know when we release new episodes of the show. For a deeper experience of Craig's approach to meditation, consider joining our Awakened Life membership program. Each month, you'll receive in-depth teachings and guidance, including a meditation workshop, 4 guided meditations, and a live online retreat with Craig. And when you register today, you can receive your first month for 50% off. Go to awakenedlifemembership.com to learn more and enroll. That's awakenedlifemembership.com. Check out our show notes for links to all the ways you can stay in touch with Craig's work. Meditation Changes Everything is created by Craig Hamilton, Susan Fries, Morgan Dix, Stephanie Murphy, Will Bowman, and Richard Klein. From all of us, thank you for tuning in.